I am delighted to be here to share my long experience with not only journalism, but also how to run media, how to manage the political opposition, governmental opposition. It's a long history, and I think there are students of journalism, there are journalists who may not have been born when I experienced all this. So I would like to share my thoughts with you in a manner that it is not current these days. So I'm happy to share stage with my good friend Rajiv Chandrasekhar. I know him as a businessman, and then as a public figure, and then as a minister, and then as a candidate here in Kerala. He has passed through different stages right in front of my eyes, maybe over the last 25 years. Sudhindra Kumar, senior journalist, and KNR Nambudiri, editor, Janmabhoomi. Of course, I could not understand a considerable part of his speech. Dr. Satish, M.G. Radhakrishnan, K.V.S. Haridas, Anuraj, and all the dignitaries who are present here. See, journalism as we see today is not journalism at all. See, journalism was a mission. There are 4 stages in which Indian journalism passed through. The pre-independence days, when journalism was a mission to free India from foreign domination. The idea was that great newspapers were started, small newspapers were started, local newspapers were started, hand newspapers were written and circulated to spread the fire of freedom. You cannot imagine what drove those people. There was one Sanghu Subramaniam in Tamil Nadu. You can Google and get his details. He started a Kalana newspaper. You know, today you have 1/100th of a rupee is called 1 paisa. In those days, 192 part of the rupee was a Kalana, Naya paisa, and that multiplies into Kalana. So he ran a Kalana newspaper, sold all his properties, destroyed himself, and the circulation went up to 100,000 copies. The British Empire was shaken in Tamil Nadu. It was a Tamil newspaper. I have seen him begging in the street. This was journalism. Journalism had a mission, a purpose. And that was how the Hindu, Indian Express, I know only those newspapers with which I am familiar. They were all started with that fiery purpose. Hindustan Times. Statesmen and Times of India were always supporting the British because they were started by the British, run by the British, manned by the British. So it is these newspapers, the Indian newspapers, which fought for freedom. So freedom and journalism was one and the same till we got freedom. There was no individual right, there was no personal right, there was no medium right of freedom of press, nothing. You had to fight for everything. And you know, in 1942, pre-censorship was imposed on the newspapers when Mahatma Gandhi announced the Quit India movement. And Mahatma Gandhi asked all the newspapers which believe in freedom to shut down the newspapers and not to obey the pre-censorship. I don't know whether you understand what is pre-censorship. Pre-censorship is before you publish anything, you have to show it to the government authorities, can I publish it or not. Don't think it was done only in 1942. It was done in 1975 during the emergency. You had to show it to the government authorities, to the local collector, to the local tahsildar. Can I publish this? Mahatma Gandhi said, you shut down the newspapers. 192 newspapers shut down, and Indian Express was the first to shut down. And Ramnath Goenka, the proprietor of Indian Express, was elected as the All India Suspended Newspapers Editors Conference. And he wrote an editorial. I am shutting down the newspaper. I don't know whether I will be able to recommence the newspaper. The paper was shut down for 100 days. That is journalism. That is newspaper. So that is how we got freedom. Freedom was not won by slogans. It was won by the sacrifices of hundreds of thousands of people, in which those who ran the newspaper, those who funded the newspaper, those who edited the newspaper, those who worked as journalists. After freedom, we got the Constitution, which guaranteed freedom of expression. But there was no restriction on the freedom of expression in the original Constitution. If you are familiar with the Constitution, Article 19(1)(a) gave freedom of expression. But in 1952, they wanted to bring freedom of restriction on the freedom because of one A.K. Gopalan case. I don't know whether you are aware. A.K. Gopalan was a very staunch, strong, powerful communist from Kerala. And Communist Party first challenged the Constitution. In fact, they had a very long discussion whether to participate in the democratic process or not to, because they knew election is corrupting. Should we participate in the corrupt medium as part of democracy? They had a very long discussion. Finally, they decided if they do not participate in elections, they will be nowhere. So they participated in the election, but they said we will break the Constitution by participating in the elections. You see the great idea of the communists, that they won't obey the Constitution, but they will obey the Constitution to break the Constitution. Of course, the cases went to the Supreme Court. And then the government realized, and I'm talking, it is about when Jawaharlal Nehru was the Prime Minister. So he brought a Constitution amendment in which he said reasonable restrictions can be imposed. That was the first thing Jawaharlal Nehru suggested. But many people in the Congress party felt, if it is restriction, which is not reasonable, then the whole freedom can go. Anybody can put any restriction. So the word reasonable must be there. You know the man who opposed the word reasonable? It was Jawaharlal Nehru. It was because the Congress was a democratic party. They all prevailed on Pandit Nehru. These are all on record. I need not have to prove it. This is all on reference. You can even Google to get these articles. So they prevailed upon Pandit Nehru to say that any restriction that you put on the freedom of expression of newspapers should be reasonable. So anyone in power, they will always think of controlling the media. You must understand, whether it is Nehru, whether it is Indira Gandhi, anybody. So that is why the Constitution guaranteed freedom of expression. And the amendment also said if you want to put any restriction on the freedom of expression, it has to be reasonable. This is the first, I told you about the freedom period, that was part 1 of the media. The second thing is part 2 of the media between 1952 and 1975. In 1975, the part 3 started. The entire freedom was destroyed for 2 years. I was very much part of that struggle. Being an RSS worker, I was doing underground work, and I was also advising the Indian Express and Ramnath Goenka. Electricity was shut down. On the day the emergency was imposed, no newspaper could come out to report that the emergency has been imposed. And all the opposition leaders have been arrested. Delhi did not know because all the Delhi newspapers were shut down by cutting down the electricity supply. Advertisements were cut. The Indian Express machinery was auctioned. One day we were sitting and for some dues, they said, we have auctioned the machinery, we have come to lift the printing machinery. This was the state of freedom. And pre-censorship was imposed. Only what the government says should be published. Then why publish the newspapers? Doordarshan is sufficient. All India Radio was sufficient. 1.5 years, the country was under worse than the British period dictatorship. When we used to print pamphlets in Tamil Nadu, because for 12 months in Tamil Nadu, the DMK government continued. There are only two spots in India, Gujarat and Tamil Nadu, when the opposition parties were in power. That is opposition to the Congress. So we used to do underground printing of Malayalam, Kannada, Bengali, Hindi. Underground printing presses we established to print the true news. Because the newspapers won't carry true news. All the journalists were there, all the highly paid editors were there. Truth will not come out. This was the third stage of the media, the emergency. Then came the fourth stage of the media, where emergency was gone. But there was enormous amount of pressure on independent newspapers like the Indian Express, where we exposed the corruption of the business people in collusion with the government, and then we exposed Bofors. 300 criminal cases were launched against the Indian Express. All the proprietor's family was under anticipatory bail. Advertisements were denied. Bank loans were cut. Whether the Indian Express will come out the next day was a matter of question mark. This happened in India. Most of you may have, those who are of that age may have forgotten, others may not have been born at that time. So when the Bofors explosive blew off Rajiv Gandhi's government in 1990, a new government came into being that lasted for 11 months. And then another government came that lasted for 4 months. Then came another government, and with that, the greatest threat to the media came, and that was globalization. Many of you do not know, if we are discussing about withering of the media, it started with globalization. You know, when we were all working in newspapers, the journalists, the journalists used to go by cycle. They used to go by scooter. Very rarely the editor used to go by car. This was journalism. This was the position till 1991-92. Even the editor will use only the company car. He never had his own car. But in 1992, when money began to come like a tsunami, then the media became rich. Foreign advertisements, foreign companies coming and establishing shops here, money flow increased. Journalism became corrupt. Journalists became corrupt. Editors became corrupt. Proprietors became corrupt. That is how withering away of journalism started. Withering away of journalism has nothing to do with the government. The government will always fight an independent newspaper. An independent newspaper will always fight a government. This is there all over the world. That is why there is constitution. That is why there is freedom. That is why there is court. That is why there is public opinion. That is where there is election. Anyone who breached freedom was voted out. Mrs. Gandhi, who imposed the emergency, was voted out in 1977, when we never thought it would happen. In fact, I was receiving Advaniji in the railway station, after he was released from Bangalore jail. So we were taking him to a place. He had come, emergency, they had announced the election. That was, if I remember right, that was on the 19th of January 1977. So we all assembled in a small place. We asked Advaniji, what is going to be our attitude? He said, we are in a serious confusion. She has declared election without lifting the emergency. Emergency is still there. Restrictions are still there. The media cannot do what it wants. You cannot hold public meetings as you want. The same MISA is there. We don't know whether we can participate in the elections at all or not. If we don't participate in the election, she will say they cannot even participate in the election. They are running away from elections. But if you participate in the elections and lose the elections, they will say, you see, people have defeated them. So what I did was right. How can we participate in the election in which we are sure to lose? How can we not participate in the elections when elections are being offered to us? And she will say, these are cowards, they cannot even participate in the elections. This was the dilemma of the opposition leaders at the time. So in 2 days, all the opposition parties decided. The politicians have a way of handling things. They know if they do not unite, they will be finished. So they all came together as Janata Party. They wiped out the Congress in the north. Why I am mentioning this is, most people think journalism is an art. Journalism is collection of words. No. Journalism is expression of thought based on a mission through the newspapers. This was completely corrupted by globalization. Then you see editors and journalists. Can you get some water? Going by foreign cars. And you see journalists in Delhi having farmhouses. Journalist is sometimes richer than the proprietor himself. This is withering away of journalism. To say some government is at fault, or that there are laws, there are authorities who are, nobody is doing anything today. Money is available in the stock market, money is available in the banks do not know who to lend the money. Previously, to get the money from government-owned banks for a newspaper was a problem. Nothing is there today. But journalism began declining because of globalization and undigested prosperity of the newspapers. Newspapers began posting profits of 1,500 crores, 1,800 crores, 3,000 crores. I remember 1980 when we were, there was a journalism wage board was there. I was arguing for Indian Express, and Mr. Matthew was arguing for, senior Matthew, what is his name? K.M. Matthew was arguing for Malayalam Manorama. You know, Times of India were all listed newspapers. They used to get money from stock market. So K.M. Matthew was telling, see, if you increase, you cannot put all newspapers in one category, even though we may have circulation and things like that. Because Times of India can access equity market. Malayalam Manorama cannot access equity market. And he put it beautifully. He said, if I issue shares in Kerala, it will be subscribed only by CPM and RSS. We will lose control over the newspapers. Very clever way of putting. But still, that was true. This was the state of newspapers. Today, many newspapers are accessing money in stock market. There is no difference between a commercial organization and newspaper today. For the newspapers today, that they are doing something great. This is wither media. money has destroyed the soul of the media is the truth. There are ideological medias which will keep on fighting. Janbhoomi is there, it will keep on fighting. Vijay Bharatam is there, it will keep on fighting. Because nobody is going to give money to them. The governments will oppose them. If freedom is there, it is only because of ideological media which wants to express a particular viewpoint. The last stage is the social media, which has resulted in the last but one stage, the TV media came, which also brought down the effect of the print media. Now the social media has made media so trivial, so meaningless. It is hard to distinguish between what is true and untrue. Even the print media is relying on the social media as the source. This is what is withering away of the media. This is what is called withering away of the media. How to fight this? It requires a large movement to fight this. Because there are foreign funded social media which is out to create disturbances in the country. It's all proved. It's all part of the judgments of the Supreme Court. This is also being discussed all over the world. A person who is investing $1 billion in a social media campaign in India can disrupt any government. So, this is withering away of the media. In print media, there is an editor. Whether something should be published or not, he will look into it. If something is wrong, is published, you go to the editor. I have myself directed apologies to be tendered to the readers for having published news which is not correct. Because there is a hierarchy. Somebody applies his mind. But when TV media came, any journalist can show anything from anywhere to the whole world by holding a camera and a mic. So there is nothing called somebody applying his mind, whether what is being shown as true or not. That is how the media affect the media as exponent of the truth that was completely brought down in quality and quantity by the TV media. At least in the TV media, they can correct it tomorrow if they have shown something wrong. But social media, you are the editor, you are the proprietor, you are the reporter, and you can show anybody anything. Who is to control it? And if anybody tries to control it, they say Article 19(1)(a). Article 19(1)(a) has nothing to do with promoting anarchy, anarchic thoughts. But an individual operating a social media network or publishing his views on Twitter, he claims Article 19(1)(a). It is dangerous because an unsupervised news item being carried is dangerous for the country, dangerous for the society. It can set the country on fire, on boil. The Supreme Court has taken cognizance of it. All over the world, and there is one artificial intelligence which has developed. You need not even have to search for any false news. It creates news. We don't know whether it is false or not. It can be circulated today. And it can be circulated even without your effort. You have to only link to a particular thing, press the button, and it will release through your Facebook or your... It's chaotic. So now, it is not one meeting like this is inadequate. you must hold 5,000 meetings in Kerala to make the people understand the dangers to which the media melted down, the withering of the media has exposed the people to such state of confusion as to what is right and what is wrong, what is correct and what is not correct, what is good and not good. The newspapers and the television are being nose-led by the social media today. It's chaotic. So I think even the media will have to rethink its efforts. Government, law, courts, public, political parties, genuine individuals will have to rethink. Because as a person who has gone through, except the first stage of the media and journalism, and seeing what is happening today and what world I am living, I feel very worried, I am disturbed. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.